All right, Kelly Newlon, welcome back to the Singletrack Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Finn. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time.
Great to have you back. Where I want to start this, I'd love to hear you talk about what is making you feel optimistic about the state of the athlete sponsorship market right now.
I'll speak specifically for trail running and globally. It seems like there's a bit of an uptick in just excitement and growth in trail running sales under the umbrella of each brand, which translates really well to a little bit more money in the athlete management bucket. So that gives me hope. And whether a brand uses that to just kind of like boost up financially their existing team or add a couple of fresh new faces, specific to the brand, but that's something that's been really exciting lately.
When we see growth in the overall market, like let's just say the market grows, I don't know, a couple $100 million. Do you have a sense? Is it based on the conversations you've had, do you know by what percentage the bucket for athlete money increases? Well, like, is it if $100 million comes in, does that mean that roughly 10 million goes to like potential athlete contracts? Like, how does the growth translate into the size of the pot of money available?
I wish it was, let's say if it was $10 million, that would be amazing. But that is a really great conversation starter because there's a couple of small and new, like small and young footwear brands out there that I think it's human nature. We see something new and we're like, oh, that's the brand. I'm going to go there. And then their offers are quite small because their entire athlete budget might be $100,000. And
Mm.
that's for their whole team. So I want to just be really clear that we recognize that and that we remember things like that. If we have a brand like Nike and then under like the ACG under the Nike umbrella, that is a much bigger bucket than say Norda or Speedland. So it's really important to remember to not expect this from the same level of partnership, right? But I would say maybe it adds another 10% to the athlete budget overall for that bucket.
And then this is less a question, more a comment, but it's good to know that as the sport is growing, as the industry is growing, it seems like there's still belief that marketing through these athletes, putting more contracts out in the world, they're seeing value in that.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point as well. Otherwise, we'd be seeing things go backwards a little bit, but it seems like when more money comes in, it's now a little obvious to be like, hey, where can we put this budget? Or how can we break it up? And it always goes into different buckets, but we're still seeing it pour into the athlete budget.
So with the growth of this whole market, is it easier to get a contract these days? Harder?
Oh, gosh, that's the million-dollar question, right? I think it's brand. I know this is a frustrating answer, but it will be brand specific.
Okay.
And within that answer, Finn, it's because each brand has a team already built up, right? So maybe if that entire team is very active from top to bottom, it's not like half of them aren't legacy athletes or it's kind of phasing out or it depends where the gaps are for each team.
Okay.
So if the team is pretty full, but maybe they're missing kind of one key player, depending on maybe it's man, woman, distance, whatever that is. And then there are some brands that just need a complete refresh. So it depends on who you're looking at, and also, and by that I mean which brands, and what their needs are, and then also what the athlete is doing. So if we have an athlete who just runs VKs, right, and they're like a VK specialist, or they're the best in the world at the VK, which is fantastic. But if a brand is not looking for a VK specialist, it doesn't really matter how fast you are. So it
Okay.
might take a little longer. I feel like the 200 is a really good example of that. I was like 50K or 200. 50K to me is growth. It's fast and it's the sky's the limit as far as growth. Someone who's a little more versatile, who does like Dan Green's a great example because He's 50 mile to 200. He's
Ah,
not a 200 miler. He ran a 200, but he is not a 200 miler. He's running JFK next month. He's done hundreds. He did CCC, so he's a good variable there. But if he were to only do 200s, what I'm not saying is that he wouldn't be sponsored. What I am saying, it might take him longer to get sponsored.
yeah. One thing that's interesting to me is there seems to be a little bit of a separation happening where there are races that you go to compete against the best of your peers. However,
Hmm.
those races don't necessarily always have the largest audiences spectating. But then you have these races like Cocodona and Mammoth where they're growing. And I think at one point in time, they will reach a level similar to a Western States or even UTMB in terms of depth. Not quite there yet. However, they pack this amazing, amazing punch where the concentration of eyeballs there through the live stream is as strong as anything, for example, on the North American continent. So what are you seeing from brands there? Like, how are they reconciling that? Like the trade-off of like competition proof against peers versus these races where just even if the competition's not there, the audience is undeniable.
Yeah. And this is a question I get a lot. So for me, it's easy to see, but I'm in it all the time. So I would love to thank you for asking this question. The competition is just not with your peers. The competition, when it's the best of the best competing, let's be like realistic with this. It's all of the brands competing against each other. It's not just the peers. So that's one question.
Hmm.
And then the other is this: eyeballs don't always translate to sales. If it's a cult following sort of thing, I know this is really hard to hear, but you sort of hit the nail on the head when you said, like, right now the 200 isn't quite there. It will be, but we have to be patient to let this grow a little bit. Right now, the 200, although they often have a lot of eyeballs on them, as you said, it's not quite translating to sales just yet. And it's going to take time. So we're going to have to wait for that. Brands are here for longevity. They're not here to jump up on something that's like just a big buzz right now. They need to see that this is proven. And it's really difficult for a lot of people to hear that.
Huh. So if you take a race, currently, like, and I'm not sure this is a fair example, but you take a fairly premier golden ticket race, former North American major or America's major, the Canyons 100K.
Hmm.
Is a brand going
Hmm.
to see more value in someone who gets sixth place at that race versus, I don't know, fourth at Cocodona?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Fourth at Cocodona is not. And this is, again, I know how special the 200 is to you. So
No, it's okay.
it's
I
just,
want this to be picked apart. I really do.
yeah. And again, I'll use, because as you know, I represent Dan Green. Dan and I had this conversation. He said, I would think that like Cocodona had more weight than Hard Rock this year. And my response to that is that's absolutely not true. And if you, it's 100% not true without pause. And here's what that is. Dan was completely embedded in Cocodona. So of course to him it means more because he has this big connection to it. But when you step back to it, Cocodona has just started. It's a fantastic event.
Yeah.
And by no means does it take away from the effort that anyone, whether you were first or last at Cocodona is. I want to be very clear about that. What I'm not saying is that the effort to do Cocodona does not matter.
Yeah.
However, Hard Rock has been around a long, long time. And 100% of the time when I speak to a brand and I'm like, what is important to you as far as races this year? Their answer is Western States, UTMB, and Hard Rock.
Hmm.
And I know that that is difficult for a lot of people who do not understand that to wrap their head around, but that is the truth.
And for the record, I love both races. I love all these races.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely curious to get to the bottom of this because I just think we're in this fascinating moment. If I look at, for example, Cocodona or Moab, I'm seeing clear evidence of these athletes, their audience size is being transformed overnight. So, for example, Killian Korth, who just won the
Mm-hmm.
Triple Crown and he won Moab, he had 4,000 followers this past summer. And today, the last time, 35,000.
Yeah.
So the lift that those races gave him in terms of an audience is transformative. I haven't quite seen the same audience lift from similar performances at other races, more like the 100Ks. So it's interesting that there's other things going on either behind the scenes or in terms of brand prioritization that still keep like a Canyons 100K above. Because like, for example, Canyons doesn't even have a live stream,
Hmm.
So like there's not much to view there. There's obviously some social media coverage, some pre-race hype, post-race credibility, but just like the social proof is right there in those live streams with like Coco Donuts. So that's why I'm so curious.
The social proof is there, but I think it's important. The big conversation here is social proof does not directly translate to sales.
Gotcha.
So we'll use Canyons because that was your example. Canyons is a golden ticket. If Canyons were, and Javelina is a great example as well. Like, and I don't mean any disrespect to this because
Yeah.
Javelina is this iconic, historic race. Everyone loves it. It's so fun. But the minute that's not a golden ticket, it loses value.
Yeah.
That's what happens. But if we go back to Canyons, Canyons in my mind weighs much more than Javelina does. And I know that it weighs more to brands than Javelina does because not only is it a golden ticket, but it's much more competitive than Javelina is.
Mm.
So again, it all goes back to how does this person compare to others globally? Because we all know there's a lot of different Europeans that also come to Canyons. And what that translates to for brands is they can watch them like, oh, I watched Finn at this. He was top 5 at Canyons, and they watch you move through the stress and pressure of what it's like to line up against actual, again, global competition, or
Mm.
even the best of the best in just the US. That
Mm.
weighs a lot because it tells the brand how you are mentally going to digest all of this when you go to Europe, or even if you're not in Europe, but how you show up on the starting line and through the race from start to finish, racing neck and neck with actual competition. So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's also, I've heard brand after brand say, hey, it's great that this person won this, but that's it. We don't want to see that again. Like they don't, if that's all they're going to do, then they're not a good fit for us because someone who wins a 200 more often than not, I'm not saying always, more often than not, that person is not going to be able to just throw down with hardcore competition in real mountains like UTMB. So that's the conversation. And again, I've heard brand after brand say they might have been fast at that, but that's not a fast runner. This person, we want to see how they move through the mountains of like real mountains. Like you and I, you live in Utah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
guys have savage mountains there. It's a much different mountain range than a lot like mountain range in, I don't know, Tennessee, right? So that's what's really important. So when a brand is like, well, this is great, but we want to see them move through other scenarios, move through different distances. It's not just the race that's specific. What we're missing here as a whole with the community is every single thing is how the person responds in competition, how the person responds in a neck and neck race,
Mm.
how this person moves through different terrain. It's the pressure of things. It's, I have so many athletes that will say, well, I did better than this person with this, and they signed, this brand signed them. No one else is looking at that
Yeah.
as acutely as that person who didn't get signed. And the person who didn't get signed has probably not raced in Europe yet. And maybe the other person has shown how that they manage themselves mentally and physically racing outside of things. I was listening to a podcast, and Andy Raddick, the tennis pro, all
Of course.
right, legend. He grew up and his family moved he and his brothers to Florida because they were like these savage tennis players as kids, right? And they were the best of the best in their area. And one of the things that I love so much about what he said was, if you think your kid is talented at something, widen your net and see how they are around everyone else. That's the conversation that we're missing. We're
Mm.
so focused on this 200 or this 100 or this 50, whatever. And it's not about that at all. It's about what that race represents or what that race does not represent.
This is so interesting. And I think the assumption that I've been making, at least for the last year or so, and again, this is value neutral. I'm not saying I want this to be the case or I don't want it to be the case, but I've been under the assumption that um, competitive ability and like podium performances have increasingly become less important to brands than someone who has an increasingly larger audience, the ability to story tell, etc. And that if you look at team models of this, for example, the Bear Performance Nutrition team, the Satisfy team, that is going to over time become the status quo, and that these teams that are built exclusively for racing and just having the most elite athletes, that's going to get deprioritized. And again, I'd love for that to be picked apart, because I think that's, whether I might be wrong. It sounds like I'm wrong, but that was the
You're
assumption I've been
wrong.
making forever. Yeah.
No, this is one of the reasons I love so much being on your podcast, Finn, because you have an ability to set your ego aside and really look at things that to just debunk things and go through this mystification of things. So I do think you're wrong, but also to your point, you are slightly right, because a brand like Satisfy, they're never going to care about the podium. So to them, those things that you mentioned do matter. But to brands like Asics and Nike and Solomon and Hoka and fill in the blank, whoever else, Adidas, TNF, performance is always top. And that's not changing anytime soon. So there are brands, to your point, that are focused on other things, but the core are still focused on podium. 100%, that has never changed. And
And
that's where the confusion's been coming.
And if they like pulled back the curtain on the analytics, they would be getting this confirmation that the performance investments are driving the sales and not any of these sort of like lifestyle storytelling influencer investments.
I think it's a combination, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're going to watch, we'll use Killian as an example, who just, with the Triple Crown, I mean, the kid's is a maniac, like
Yeah.
so impressed. For him, a part of its performance and story, it's a combination of those things. But I can tell you without pause, as the person who negotiated Riley Brady's contract, never once did I have a conversation about social media with Nike.
Wow.
Not once. And I think when Riley signed, they had like 2,000 followers. Riley might have like 5,000 now. I don't know. I haven't even looked because I don't care.
Mm. Again, like thinking to, I mean, the present, but also the future, are you getting the sense that people like myself who are getting caught up in this anxiety that athletes now have to have two roles, they have to perform in races and also perform on social media, is that largely unfounded? Like, are we now in this era where it's like you can just focus on being an athlete and that's it?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, there's always deliverables, but one of the first things I do is knock the deliverables down in the contract. I'm like, this is just too many things. The deliverables for the athletes that I manage, I don't manage any influencers per se. The athletes that I manage are very focused on racing and performing, and there's much more to them outside of that. But the deliverables for them are not so much like social media as they are showing up in person at events and helping their brand be present in different ways.
Hmm.
So it's, to your point, there's a shift. There are some brands that it's really important for. I mean, look at the feed. It's very
Yeah.
obvious if you follow the feed to see that they have very specific social media deliverables. And that's a driving force for the brand. I cannot say that same thing for most of the A brands, meaning like footwear brands. So it depends. My response to that would also be, yes, it's sort of brand specific, but it's also person specific. So maybe like look at John G. right? That's a great example with Callie Vincent on their team, and she's the ultimate influencer. She's such a superstar. But then they also work with Ryan Montgomery. So not everyone in their team shows up as heavily as this social media machine as Callie does. They allow what Janji does that's really magic is they allow each of their athletes and members of their team to show up for who they are. So they let Ryan show up in a really authentic way. It's not Ryan's style to constantly be on Instagram, but when he is, it's very intentional and authentic. And as is Callie's, but Callie's much more of a machine in that way because she's not focused on the performance and as Ryan is, if that is helpful.
How many brands in the space right now have a similar prerogative as ACG, where when an athlete joins that ecosystem, for the most part, their social media obligations are minimal? Like, is ACG alone in that? Are there like, from what you've seen?
Again, I will say ACG is one of those brands that it's athlete specific. You know, they have some athletes who are all over the internet and love social media, so they'll allow that athlete to do that. And uh, they're broken up a bit as far as social and in person, right? So because there's nothing more fun than, you know, if you're a fan and you go to a fun run and all of a sudden, you know, Finn Melanson's there leading the fun run, right? Or Riley Brady or Phil Caleb, right? Like that's really fun stuff. To me, that has a bigger impact. It's all only doing social media. So to answer your question, the brands that are truly focused on performance have a good kind of breakup with in person and
Okay.
social media. So the North Face, Hoka, Adidas. Adidas is really particular with their social. It is all focused on like, hey Finn, we have this new fill in the blank coming out, or the entire team is like, we have these new things coming out, these new products. We want every one of you to post something within this time frame focused on this. So they're driving that in a different way. Yeah, again, the brands that are focused on performance are the ones that have a little bit more flex in that. Does that answer your question?
So we talked about what's positive right now in the industry and what's working well. Where do you see room for improvement, or what are some things that you would like to see change based on your observations, your workings in the space last year or so?
Gosh, things I would like to see change. I see the biggest shift in positivity coming from the brands, and things that I would like to see changed would be from the athlete side. So I'm sure this is not as the answer that most people would expect. There's this kind of overwhelming conversation that happens specifically around this time of year when it's like negotiation and contract time, right? So, and it will carry, let's say, from October to December. And the reason for that is because between now and then, that's when the athletes who do not get signed notice everyone else getting signed. So it's human nature, like it's upsetting. So what I see is what I would like to see is for athletes to understand like a brand cannot take everyone on. There's very few spots in there. Some brands, like a big year for some brands might be to take like 3 athletes on. But within those 3 athletes, they probably also had to let a few athletes go. So if it's not your year, getting organized for next year is helpful. But what I would love to see is a little bit more compassion and understanding from the athlete side.
Mm. How large are these teams? Like, what's the average team size these days?
Gosh, let's say a trail running team for a brand that's global. Maybe they'll have 8 to 10 in the US, and then in Europe it's probably 15 to 20
Mm.
if they're European based. If it's a team that's US based, then it's kind of flip-flopped. So maybe a team in the US would have I don't know, 12 to like 15 or so athletes in the US, and then maybe they'll pick up another five in Europe.
So,
Uh, yeah, for running. But if you, let's say if you look at like the North Face, Finn, like their athlete manager manages like 40 athletes, but that's like a cross sport, right? Because TNF is ski, climb, run.
okay. But it sounds like gone are the days of like that Solomon model from the mid 2010s where it looked like they had upwards of 100 athletes on the team.
So many. Yeah, I agree with that. It it was around the time where they had the Young Guns program, right? They
Yeah.
took on like 20 kids. And what do they have in the North America now? They have three, two in the US and one in North America, in Canada, Marie-Anne Hogan, right? And then if you look at Europe, it's very heavy in Europe.
Is there a correlation between reduced team sizes and more people on each of those teams? And I know this is all relative based on financial situations, but are those core athletes, because it's a smaller team, they're all getting paid better now?
I hope so. Yeah, that's a pattern that I see for sure. And that's again where, athletes kind of on the outside who have not been signed by a particular brand, know that. Like sometimes, and one of the things I love hearing, and I heard this last year, I guess it was this year, several times, was before we add anyone else, we have this a little bit of influx of cash here. We want to right size the team that we have now before anyone else is added. And that to me is pretty great.
Okay. If you can't answer these, it's okay. But we could say generic large brand. Let's say that they have 10 to 15 athletes on their trail running roster, North
Hmm.
America. What percentage of those athletes would you guess are making at least $50,000 a year base?
Okay, I think I can answer this because you said generic. And it obviously, like you said, it depends on the team, on the brand. I can tell you, fill in the blank generic team, every single person I would have signed to that team would have been above that.
Wow.
Every
That
single one this
that's a
year.
huge improvement even from 5 years ago.
Enormous, even from 2 years ago.
What accounts for that?
And I will say this, Finn, because this is really important. Athletes in the United States have no idea how well they're paid compared to European athletes. That same team, that same brand that's global, I can get their athletes, depending on the athlete, I can get them that in the United States. I have got to fight like all hell to get that in Europe. It's a big difference. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
I would say trail running is growing, right? Where in the past, let's say a brand that, um, I don't know what brand can I use. I'll just say like Hoka. They're a great example because they're road and trail, right? So let's say, actually I'll use Brooks because that makes more sense. Their
Yeah.
roots are in road, right? So they're a road shoe, they're a shoe company, they're footwear at their core. Yes, they have apparel and some accessories, but they're footwear brand at their core. So the bulk of their sales are, let's say if it was in the past, it's been 90% road running shoes for sales. It's maybe 8 to 10% of their sales would have been trail running. And now maybe it's 18 to 20,
Mm.
which is again more money.
Picking up on something you said earlier, and again, you don't have to respond to this. What I think I heard was American trail running superstars are doing a lot better financially than European trail superstars.
Yes.
Wow. So that
Across the board too, even in road running, honestly, I mean the cost of living is more expensive in the United States. We have healthcare we have to pay for. So
yeah.
there's a lot of ways. When I come to the table, if I'm like, hey, I'm working with Finn Melanson, blah, 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 here's my ask for Finn. So if I come to the table with numbers for that, Finn, and it's broken down into base, travel, coach, PT, all the things, when I go, I don't just give them that. I go through each stipend and explain why I'm asking.
Okay.
And it's easy for me to do that, to ask for more in the United States because it's really easy to show why you need that.
So if almost everyone on a generic major North American trail brand team is making 50K base, how about the number within that team that are making over six figures base?
And you said it's a team of 15?
Yeah, ish.
10, let's say 15-ish. 3,
Wow.
maybe 4, depending. It really will depend on, yeah, I feel like I'm good with that, 3 to 4. It
So then
depends on the, and it's surprising, right? It depends on who needed to come in, what hole they were filling, and what that athlete brings to the table.
that's really cool. So we're talking across the major brands, there are maybe 15 to 20 North American ultra trail athletes that are making over six figures base in the sport right now.
Absolutely.
That's a huge improvement.
It is, even in just the past year, Finn. It's so exciting. Like I have a hard time going to sleep at night because I'm so excited on a daily basis.
Wow. Wow. And do you get the sense, or actually, it's not even the sense, are you seeing proof that when those deals are on the table and they're accepted, the majority of these athletes are then going full time on, or are they leveraging and keeping some other job in the process?
I would say the majority are probably going full time. There's a couple out there that are like, look, I know if I go full time in this, that I my entire identity is just going to be wrapped up in this, and that's not a healthy way for me to be. So if they aren't, that's usually the reason because they just need a little bit of separation. Otherwise, they're just tunnel vision. I mean, to do that job well, you have to already have become a bit selfish, right, with everything that you're doing because everything is focused around you as training, racing, recovering. So if that's all that is always there, it can get a little bit daunting and overwhelming. So I actually really love to see someone who's like, yes, I'm all in, but I also am doing this one small thing off to the side.
Do you think right now in the sport, and I'm assuming it would have to be based on a combination of deals, is there an athlete in the sport that is making over 500K a year?
Oh, for sure. Probably 4 or 5.
Wow. And
Yeah.
anywhere close to a
And
million?
just in the US, yes, close to 1 million. Absolutely.
We really? Wow.
Yep. A couple. 3.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's
Isn't
going to
that
shock a lot
amazing?
of people. That's going to shock a lot of people in the audience.
Yeah. Now, I think it's important because of this. There's this huge thing. There's the floor and the ceiling. You
Yeah.
need to make sure. And then there's like if we start from like head to toe, if we start at the top, the head, right? That's our ceiling. There's a there's this a small percentage between the head and shoulders, and then the core of that, like our actual core from like
Mhm.
shoulders to my knees, um, that's kind of the 50 to 60 base K.
Yeah.
And then below that, like we have to start somewhere. If you look at this, like it's widely known, this has been an interview, so I'm not, letting the
Yeah.
cat out of the bag here, but Tara Dower's first contract with Ultra when they were like, all right, we'll move you from this team and see what you can do next year was $10,000. You have to start somewhere. And we all know what happened to Tara the next year and
Mm.
what that $10,000 just commitment from Ultra gave her. So we have to start somewhere. So when someone's like, well, I'm not going to sign for this, or like, I understand that. I super applaud waiting, and I would never sign a contract for like $5,000. Just wait. That's not doing anything for you, honestly. But you can get your foot in the door. There's people that are kind of just getting into, even someone that's like, well, I've been doing this for 8 years. I'm like, yeah, but that first 6 years was not, that was just you cutting your teeth, right? Now you're at this stage. If you need to get your foot in the door, sign a 1-year contract for, 20K, uh, and go from there. And put a
Mm.
clause in, have some sort of clause in there, that's like, I'll sign for this, but if this happens, then I'm getting this.
I'm going to make another assumption here and let me know if I'm wildly off track or if I'm going somewhere with it. I would assume that if you're going to get on this ladder of performance, which theoretically would get you to a financial spot where you could be making close to $1 million a year, my assumption is that you have to get on this, I'll call it an event treadmill, where it's like for the next at least 5 years until you become a bigger deal than those races somehow, you're doing Hard Rock, you're doing Western States, and you're doing UTMB and those satellites for the foreseeable future. Am I correct in that assumption, or do you have any leeway in where you can perform?
Yeah, I mean, there's always leeway. And look, we all know that Hard Rock and Western States aren't a given.
Yeah.
You got to get into those guys. But, you know, one thing that trail running has avoided and been able to is because we're not in the Olympics yet, dot, dot, dot. When an Olympic athlete is focused on something, they're focused on that for a minimum of 4 years. And right now we have this freedom to just be like, this is my schedule for next year. This is my A race for now. And what I do the year after that will be completely different.
Mm.
So we're really kind of like not seeing the difference between this sport and the rest of the running world, right? When people focus on a single thing for years until they nail it. And
Mm.
Jim Walmsley is actually a great example of that. Look at him and the effort that he put in until he figured out Western States. Look at the effort he put in until he figured out UTMB. Geez, the guy moved there.
Mm.
Like this effort needs to be bigger. And until we do that, like it's really easy for me to see why someone's sponsored and why they're not, and why someone is making deeper figures and why someone is not.
Mm.
It's very transparent. So I would say, to answer your question, yes, pick one of those as your A race, and don't just do it next year or the 1 year and be like, okay, well, this is how it turned out, therefore I'm done. Figure that shit out, right? If you're really focused on that, figure it out. And the things in between there, one thing I don't like to do, Finn, is like with an athlete's like, well, what should I do next year? I'm like, well, what sounds fun? What do you want to do? What's your A race? What's the frame of next year, right? Like the racing. What is your A race that you're really focused on as a pro? Uh, how are you going to get to them around it? And then pick something else that doesn't matter for anything else. Even if you're just like, every year I love to go and do, I don't know, the whatever Salt Lake 10K turkey trot, right? Like, please add that to your roster because that's the sort of stuff that's really important. It can't be all work all the time. So I would say there should definitely be 2 to 3 things on an athlete who's serious about this that are races that brands are watching, and the rest in between there to help you get to those. Add some fun stuff. It doesn't have to be a race. It can be just like going out and doing Nolans for no other reason than doing Nolans. Like we can do things without winning or have worrying about winning or setting an FKT. I love the freedom of people doing that.
Aside from some of the races we talked about earlier, like Cocodona and Mammoth, because I do see those races, those events as rocket ships, and for me, it's sort of like an inevitability question. Are there any
Hmm.
other races that maybe people in the audience, and myself included, aren't aware of that you've seen rise the ranks of these tiered lists of brand prioritized races in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think that one thing is really important too. There's a kid that keeps reaching out to me from Germany. He's wonderful. He's like, these are the things I've done, and I won all these. I'm like, that's awesome, but none of those matter to brands. If this is your end goal, then we need to shift that. And he's like, well, how do I know what's important to brands? Depending on the brand, for me, it's easy to see because I have at my disposal hundreds of contracts where I can just go and look at a bonus structure. And it's all I have to do is look at what is on the A, B, and C tier bonus structure for a brand to know which races are important to them. So when I look at those, JFK is always still a sleeper. That's been around the block for a long time, but I never discount it because brands will look at it. I think High Lonesome is, it's young still. It's what, 5 years old? And will always have my heart. I actually catered Kelsey and Caleb's wedding, so I'm
Wow.
super big fans of them. And that race is exceptional. And I think where it's at right now at the young age of 5 or 6, Caleb's going to listen and he'll send me a message and correct me. But I think High Lonesome has a future in the sport, and it often gets forgotten about because of the time frame of where it's at in between things. But that course is hard. It's a states qualifier. It's a hard rock qualifier. It means something, and it's not really showing up on bonus structures yet from races, other than probably Ultra because Ultra sponsors it. But I think in the future that one's going to grow, and it doesn't have like lots of competition right now as far as people that show up for it, but I think that's going to change. I think by the time High Low hits 10, that's going to be a contender. I would love to see big things for that race. What else? Run Rabbit's always a funny one too. It's fun to see who shows up at it. But for now, it's really it's the core. I mean, it's easy to see, like when you're in a live stream and just watching who's in that live stream, the brand managers or athlete managers from brands that watch a race from a live stream, like, okay, I see you there. You're watching this race. You don't even have any athletes in here, but you're watching it. So I feel like I'm not answering your question.
Well, let me ask this. No, you brought up a good point. Does it surprise you that despite a really generous prize purse, does it surprise you that Run Rabbit doesn't draw a denser competitive field?
Uh, no, but honestly, Finn, I really think it's because it's so close after UTMB. And this year, there was UTMB and Worlds. So it's kind of sandwiched between some things, but yeah, I mean, it's not, I feel like the reason, yes, there's a big good prize purse there, but the athletes that of higher kind of caliber that would start showing up there at that stage of the year, they're not going to risk an injury for something that they probably already got a bonus from
Hmm.
from their brands already, like a race bonus that rolled over. But, that said, it didn't stop Riley Brady from going out and throwing down, right? But Riley didn't run UTMB or Worlds.
Right. Right. This is more a comment. I've only been in the sport for about 10 years, so I haven't quite seen like the evolution and sort of the comings and goings of races. But if you look at like the current crop, top of the tier, I'm really interested to see how durable they can be as races like High Lonesome are like structurally doing all of the right things to put themselves in a position to be prominent. Like the investment in the live stream, having like a dedicated person on their staff that does athlete recruitment, Caleb and Kelsey carrying at the level that they do, a pretty cool course, list goes on. I love seeing competition between events because I do think that it leads to a better product for the consumer, a better experience for the pros. So yeah, more of a comment, but like I'm curious to see like the durability of like the current top tier and how things could change up
Hmm.
as there's this new wave coming in.
Yeah, I mean, something like Western States, Hard Rock, UTMB, I don't think those guys are going anywhere, at least for a minute. But I think that they can very easily stay where they are while a race like High Lonesome grows and joins them at that level.
Okay, so not mutually exclusive like this, that we could see just like another addition into the top tier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would love that. Gosh, that would be great. Especially, did you run high-low this year, Finn?
I've paced and crewed it.
Okay.
Never run it.
So next on the docket for you, you should definitely do. I feel like it's
Yes.
next up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can just be just join the group. And again, we just gotta be patient. And I know, Caleb and I have talked about this. It's like what makes him such one of the things that makes him such an exceptional race director and creator, for that matter, of that whole freestone endurance is he asks such great questions like, what are we not doing that you think we should be doing, or what can we do better? He's not just showing up posturing and being like, this is what we're doing, all these great things. But he's like, I want to take a step back and look at like what are we missing that we can do as we continue to grow.
Mm.
And then honestly, it's just the waiting and growing. It's like playing the guitar, or like anything. We have to practice a craft, and it just doesn't happen overnight. Look how old Western States is. I was going to that race in the 90s. It was not the machine it is today. So
Yeah.
we have to allow things to grow like everything else in life.
And this is more for the audience, because I know you know this, but it's interesting to me because High Lonesome does not have a demand problem. They have a lottery, they sell out. There's people that are like on the wait list dying to get in. And we're more just getting into like the niche aspect of, now that you've solved that equation, you can focus on just like, how do we increase notoriety and competitive density? So it's just cool that they're working on like a second or third order race directing problem right now.
Exactly. And in such a short period of time. I'm sure for Caleb, it feels like this race has been around for longer because the pains of a race director. Race directing is hard. But I remember the first year of High Low. It was just a minute ago, and it's really like it's impressive to watch that growth. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see that they're like the lottery's maxed out.
Switching topics, I want to talk about, we talked earlier about continental differences. Like there is sort of a different sponsorship world in Europe than there is here in the US. But even within the US itself, I have seen and heard over the years geographical differences. So, for example, I have a lot of friends in the Northeast, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and they sort of like wave their fist in the air thinking that like the brands don't care about them. They've been left behind. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. But the center of gravity in the sport is in Boulder, Colorado, and Flagstaff, and Salt Lake, and Seattle. How true is that? Like, are they well founded in their frustrations that like they're missing out on a lot of opportunity?
Yeah, I hear this once in a while, only from East Coasters. And transparently, I moved to Colorado 20 years ago from Virginia, so I understand. This is not me
I did the
picking
same.
sides. But yeah, I mean, Eric LaPuma I adore him. He's wonderful, and he moved from, as you know, Boulder back out that way. So Eric and I've had this conversation as well. Never once have I heard a brand say, "Oh, well, that person lives there." Like, no one cares about that. But I will say this, if you're only racing in the East Coast and you're not racing, because what's not in the East Coast? Golden tickets, UTMB races, like it all goes back to like I don't go to a Chinese restaurant and ask them where the spaghetti is,
Mm,
you know?
yes.
Like literally giving the recipe of what brands are looking for, but you're not doing it and you're staying here and complaining, which I get. I understand that frustration. But right now, if I was someone who was really fast and was a strong athlete on the East Coast, I would probably do half my races there and I would do the other half in the center of the country and to the West Coast.
And then is there any value in relocating like physically and being based out of Boulder just to like be closer to a brand like a Scratch Labs, or if you're in Salt Lake, a Black Diamond, like do you see the value in relocation?
That's such a funny question, but it's so true. I hear this all the time. I mean, like, if you want to live in Boulder just so you can eat at Scratch every day, like, go for it. But seems like a heavy commute to me, or a big reason to uproot your life. I would say no. There's a whole lot of people who show up and are relevant and do exceptional things that don't live in Boulder. And I'll use Joaquin Lopez as a great example. So Joaquin, third on the podium last year at UTMB, first Latino to ever podium at UTMB. He lives in Spain because his wife went to university in Spain. But he and his wife Maria are both from Ecuador, and they're moving back to Ecuador. And there's not a whole lot of shoe sales in Ecuador,
Mm.
but that's where they want to live because that's their family and their home. However, Joaquin will race primarily in Europe, and he's coming to the United States a couple times this year or next year. So you can live wherever you want, but I will say again, just to drive this home, if you're not visible in races that have visibility, you're missing the boat. And it's not like you have to only do those races, but I would say there should be an intention to do 2 to 3 races that are impactful in who's watching them. And if that's not in the East Coast, if that's not in Alaska, if that's not in Florida, fill in the blank. I mean, there's plenty more places than the East Coast that aren't getting shine right now. But if you're not paying attention to what you should be doing, then that's what nothing's going to change.
Okay. All right. This is another hypothetical, and I'm going to say a lot here. So if you need me to repeat anything, let me know. But
Okay.
I'd like you to rank order these 4 categories in terms of the resources and compensation opportunities available to athletes. So the first one is footwear. The second one is apparel. The third is nutrition. And the fourth is technology, which could mean like, I don't know, lights, watches. You could define it however you want. If you were to rank order those and you were to advise an athlete on like how to pursue things, what they could reasonably expect, and let's just say that they're, for lack of a better phrase, like a mid-tier athlete, they're like the person that's making $50K from a shoe sponsor. How would you rank order those?
Rank order as far as what they should focus on?
More like compensation opportunity, like what percentage of their total income it could possibly represent.
Okay.
And
I'll start.
one more piece of context too, because I know that there's a lot of athletes out there right now that like I'm always wondering, oh, they don't have a shoe partner, but they do have a nutrition partner and like a tech partner, apparel partner. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll start with footwear and apparel. I'm going to use Ryan Montgomery as an exceptional example, right? He declined a footwear offer strategically, and he's with Janji for apparel, right? So he has a really great freedom to wear whatever shoes he wants. And this past year, or past Western States, we've done a couple collabs. I actually represent Ryan.
Okay.
So Ryan did a collab with Norda because he ran in the Norda 005 for Western States. And he did a really awesome collab with them. And he wouldn't have had the freedom to do that had he had another footwear partner. He also did a collab with Hoka around UTMB. So there's some really fun freedom in there. So for anyone who doesn't have a footwear partner, I just want to give you like, there's a lot of fun, good, hopeful things in freedom within that. So footwear and apparel often go together, but don't always have to. But so let's say if it's footwear and apparel together, like ACG, Hoka, Solomon, Adidas, right? That would be 75% of your. I'm just taking notes here in my little notepad.
Yeah.
Let's say 75% of your financial investment from a partnership. That said, there's a couple of those companies on that list where, let's say, so we'll bump down to nutrition next, right? So if you are with a brand that does not allow secondary branding, you're going to get less from a nutrition partner. If that happens, you should have asked your footwear/apparel for more money to compensate for that. Because if that's your block, right? Things that are in your way. So another cool thing that's happening, though, this is a big answer, is there are a few brands out there, and I really applaud this, that are like, all right, fine, we'll put you on our athletes' racing kit. However, here are the parameters of that. This is where it can go. And if you want to do that, nutrition sponsor or eyewear or timepiece, whatever it looks like, you have to compensate the athlete with this amount of monetary value in order for us to put you on their kit. So, which I'll really love, because one, the brand is like, hey, we're happy to share this space with you, but you need to make it worthwhile for the athlete. So let's say if it's like you have to give $8,000 worth of sponsorship or you're not going on the kit. You can give less than that, but you're not going on the kit if you don't do that. So it helps the athlete, and it's also for an athlete like who doesn't have an agent. It's easier for them to be like, sorry, I can only do this because my main partner said it. So does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What percent of shoe? This is you made me think. What percent of shoe brands out there currently require a head to toe relationship? Like they own that entire aspect of the relationship, and there's just no negotiables there.
I would say if you're an athlete who has like a $10,000 contract, you can probably do whatever the heck you want.
Oh, okay.
If you're an athlete and they're like investing in you for like 50K base salary or more, which means you hopefully have like a 75K package
Yeah.
for the other stipends. Those are brands that are not gonna, like, if you're not head to toe, you're not gonna get that. If you're like, yeah,
Mm,
but I really want to wear this, then it shows the brand that you're not as committed to them as they are to you, and they're probably gonna back up on that offer a little bit. If you're like, if there's, they say like you have a TNF hat, your TNF head to toe, that's it. It's not negotiable.
interesting. Yeah, because one of the things that I find interesting there is, okay, these are at their core, they're footwear brands. And we're now, for example, seeing this rise in a lot of really cool, innovative pack companies. Tantrums, Ultraspire's been here a while, Raid. And you could argue that in a lot of cases, they're making a better product for that category because they focus on it. And so I think and again, it could be the case that, these shoe brands are catching up and they're just making custom stuff for their athletes. And behind closed doors, they just have different arrangements. But from a performance standpoint, that could be an interesting trade-off, right? I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
Where maybe you don't, because you have that, you're required to do that head to toe thing. You might be taking a lesser technical product on your back or apparel wise than you would if you had more
Mm-hmm.
freedom.
Absolutely. And that's always kind of been the case. I mean, honestly, like it right now, those are the brands, but 10 years ago it was UD, Nathan, and Solomon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it just depends. Every few years, it all switches up. And I agree with you, 99% of the time, the company that's focusing just on a pack or a belt makes a better pack or belt than the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the brands, which can be hard. So your point of behind closed doors, a lot happens. If there were 10 athletes for a brand, I can say probably 7 out of those 10, like the top 70%, the heavy hitters, they're the ones that have negotiated on things behind the scenes.
Okay.
And there's a few brands that are like, look, we want you to wear our pack, but if it just does not work for you, then we're going to take the pack that you really like, the existing one, and we'll just black label it, meaning remove all the labels on it. It just looks like us showing up until our design team can create a pack that works for you in a way that this one does. And we want you to be on board with helping us develop that and design and give feedback and testing, which I love. But yeah, that's a big conversation. I feel like we could have this conversation for days. So yeah, it depends. Depends on the brand, depends on the person. There's a couple athletes out there, like I have someone right now who is going to have an offer from a brand, and I know that they're going to say to me, will I get to wear the whatever? And my response will be, you can wear the whatever, but now your offer goes to this. And I don't want you to have that conversation with the brand. You have it with me because this brand is really invested in you. And if you have the conversation with them on this, they're going to think that you're not invested in them because you still have one foot in the pool with this other company. So it's a big conversation for sure.
I want to highlight something you said earlier, which I think is really important, especially for anyone that doesn't have representation during this contract season, which is if you are going to get into the category of these like 75K and up compensation packages, to make sure that when you're talking with the brand, you're accounting for the head to toe stipulations. I think that's huge. I think people might go in and get less because they weren't aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, I mean, I remember having this call with Ultimate Direction and a couple of athletes who are on the Adidas team right now that have been with them for years, and they were grandfathered into wearing their first 2 years, they were allowed to wear Ultimate Direction because they lived locally and Adidas saw that as a good community relationship. And then they were like, but after this, when we're able to offer you more, and once we both agree, like the next contract is going to be bigger, that's going to go away.
Okay. Yeah, and I think one of the other assumptions I had before talking with you here is that in almost every single example, it's the shoe brands that have the most money to offer an athlete, and that apparel, nutrition, tech are these like ancillary add-on deals. But like that Ryan Montgomery example to me is interesting that actually they can make up like a living in the sport if you wanted to.
Yes, absolutely. Ryan's a really smart guy too. I mean, he's going to school for his MBA. He's really
Yeah,
strategic in what he
yeah,
does, but he also, more importantly, is very authentic. He would never sign with a brand that he was not fully on board with. If it did not align with him, Ryan is he is an impressive human in that way. I appreciate him for that. But yeah, I would say to answer your question from 10 minutes ago,
Sorry,
let's say if you
I'm all over
pack
the
it,
place.
I know we're both that way. That's why I like talking to you. But we're in apparel collectively, let's say 75%, and then nutrition, and then the under the technology blanket of like timepiece and eyewear, that's that would make up the rest, the 25% there, depending on who the nutrition brand is too. There's a couple out there that I'm like, all right, I see you. You're surprising with the
Yeah,
cash dollars right now. And not for everyone. Again, it's if they're like, this is the person we want, we're going to find the money to do this, and we're going to be really invested in a partnership with this, which I think is so great. And then the headlamps a little bit. You'll get a little bit from them, but honestly, at some point, like if someone's going to pay you $3,000, in my mind, that's when I would be like, Finn, is it really worth $3,000 to you to have to do all the deliverables that this company's asking you? If they're just going to give you a free headlamp anyway, like just take the headlamp and walk. Like
mm.
it sometimes it's just like, oh my gosh, this is just too much. I don't need 17 sponsors.
I have to ask you about non-endemic stuff for a second.
Hmm.
One of the first that comes to mind because it is top of mind. I've seen athletes like Corey Woltering, Lucy Bartholomew, Tim Tollefson. They have
Hmm.
uh, automobile partnerships.
Yeah.
What would an automobile partnership for an athlete typically look like in this space? Again, not using any of them as an example, but like if you were to get Rivian to work with one of your athletes, or Ford or Toyota, like what would that typically look
Hmm.
like there? What am I seeing on
Uh,
social media,
yeah. So, oh, what are you seeing in social media? Um,
or what's
you
behind it?
know, we've all slept in our cars at the start line before, or at a trailhead, or for a fill in the blank, right? Or if we're crewing, like there's so much value in that. And again, as we all know, these are few and far between, right? So it's really, I mean, it's such a great, for lack of a better word, an auto dealer or a sponsorship is such a great vehicle for social media, for storytelling, whether it's YouTube or Instagram, or I don't even what else is relevant right now. It's really just the kind of those two. But or if you're an athlete who Tim is a great example because he's a race director, and especially now that he has the Mammoth with he and Hillary, that's days and days of being out there and being visible. So it's really easy. I mean, even myself, like if I travel, I have a big magnet that's just my rad logo that I just throw in my suitcase and I throw in my rental car, right? So it's constant visibility, but the storytelling is immense because it's daily life, it's training, it's being at races. And if you're someone who is having a film made about you, now that car's in a film, like it's a really cool support.
Hmm. And is it typically just like, are you actually are you owning the car? Are you leasing it? Is there money behind the deal typically?
I think I've seen a little bit of everything. I've seen a company outright like this car is yours. I've
Wow.
seen like a lease under that athlete's name. I've seen either one of those scenarios with a chunk of money for fuel, like for mileage to cover like that sort of thing. So it depends, and it's really easy to get creative with that. There's an athlete that I'm working with right now who he's not American, but he lives in a very remote kind of third world country, literally,
Hmm.
and he has to have a car, and he has really struggled with the possibility of this car partnership coming to automotive partnership coming to fruition because he's also really focused on environment and like, look, we can get you a hybrid, but you have to have a car, otherwise you can't. Like the hospital's an hour away. Like it's really important. So we're getting wrapped around that, but also in the country that he lives, there's a big cycling influence and football, soccer influence. And one of the biggest non-endemic partnerships within that country is with a bank. So now we have a bank and a car.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, this is cool. So bank, you've seen some bank opportunities, car opportunities. What are some other non-endemics and maybe even specific brands that are showing interest in the space?
Yeah. Healthcare is a big one.
Whoa.
Right? Which I know, very exciting. Probably not for anyone that doesn't live in the United States, but and within that, let's say if it was Cigna Health, I'll just use them because I
Yeah.
was reading something about them this morning. The partner that I would best pair with something like Cigna would be someone who is a professional outside of running in that they are exceptional at public speaking, right? So what they do, one of the things, instead of just social media for Cigna, this is a person who shows up and does like keynote speaking for Cigna, whether it's recorded for like their entire team of like 2,000 employees at a certain like branch of the company, or if it's someone that's showing up to do keynote speaking at like a week-long conference for Cigna Health at, for their employees. So there's a whole different thing there that goes way outside of what kind of like our grassroots social media that we would use, like YouTube or Instagram for traditional trail running athletes. This is someone who is a heavy hitter in a much more like a professional business sense, if that makes sense.
Okay. Few more categories that I want to touch on before we go. First one is platform importance. Like to the extent that these brands do care about social media, do the athletes have free reign on where they can show up as long as they're investing in it? Like if it's Substack or YouTube or Instagram, or similar to these racing tiers, is there also a social media ranking hierarchy where you like have to be somewhere but not necessarily somewhere else?
That's probably brand specific. I like the question. One thing I hear often when someone, let's say I'm negotiating with a brand for an athlete, I'll just use you as an example, and they'll be like, we can't really get the money for this, at this, but does Finn have YouTube? YouTube, like everyone wants YouTube right now. So if they were like, oh, does Finn have YouTube? I'm like, you know what he totally does? These are his numbers, these are his views, these are whatever, downloads. Can you download YouTube? Can you download things from YouTube?
I think you can do it for the offline listening or viewing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's something that a brand that's interested in YouTube for their parent company, let's say if it's, I don't know, VF, which is, we all know is like Ultra, TNF, Smartwell, Icebreaker. If YouTube were interested or of interest to them, then that's maybe more of where they would want you to focus on your social media.
Okay. How about the extent to which an athlete could negotiate a creative team into their contract? And again, I don't know if this is how it worked in the David Roche deal, but I think one of the most impactful content series that we've seen in 25 has been the YouTube series that David did leading up into Western States. And I think he's also carried that over into Leadville, probably Javelina. I don't know how that deal with the feed came together, but like, is that an increasingly common thing or available thing where an athlete could get like a videographer like his director Cody into the mix?
I would say it's going to be a very individual build, Flynn. So I'll use Joaquin as part of this we spoke about earlier because he spoke about this publicly. So he is sponsored by Kailas, which is a Chinese company. And part of his partnership with them was that they put a clause in his contract for X amount of money to create a film about Joaquin as a runner from Ecuador and as a Latin man on UTMB's podium. So just his story in general, and so that was built into Joaquin's contract. So yes, it's common at this point. I almost always have some sort of creative piece in the contract that I work through. But as far as your own creative team, like some people like Joaquin could have cared less who the creative team was.
Okay.
He, when I'll tell you, he was smart because the creative team that he did work with was Kailas. So they also have their own budget to go towards athletes. So now we have double dipped. So now he gets more money investment towards that actual project. So I think it probably sounds great to have your own creative team, but if I can use in-house on some occasions and double dip, it's a smarter deal for the athlete.
Yeah, because one of the things that I was thinking about is the extent to which that, like, if you build up this library of content storytelling while you're still really competitive, does it create some sort of insurance policy, figuratively speaking, for like the second half of your career, or whenever you decide to be less relevant from a competitive standpoint and you want to transition into like more of just this like lifestyle athlete or someone that's doing cool projects, but not necessarily trying to win UTMB?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it can't help. One, I mean, continuing to beat your own drum is absolutely never a wrong decision, and media does that, right? But I'll say it's helpful that and just having documentation of it, so being interviewed, being on podcasts, being, whether it's your own product or if it's someone else's. I think it can't help,
Okay.
or it can't not help, rather. It's a good idea.
I think two of my biggest takeaways from this conversation, one is that athletes are making way more money than I think a lot of the general public or the fans of the sport think. That's a huge takeaway from me. I think that's really, really super interesting.
And not all of them, but
No,
it is
but the floor is
growing.
pretty high.
Yes.
The floor is higher than anything.
Yes.
The floor is a lot
Yes.
higher than anything,
100%.
which is
Yeah.
awesome. And thank you for your work on that. And then the other thing is, I know it's important, but it seems like content matters less than I thought it did. I was a huge believer in the power of content for athletes coming into this episode. And I think you've maybe talked me away from that position a little bit. And it's truly more about just like being a good athlete, which I think is probably liberating for a lot of athletes out there.
Yeah. And, again, it's not that it's not important, but it's probably a whole lot less important than the general community thinks. And if everyone's creating content all the time, it dilutes the content that's out there, quite honestly. If everybody's making a film, like, I'm gonna stick to watching my St. Bernard video, you know? So I would say be intentional with it, but yes, it's probably doesn't weigh. At the end of the day, the buckets that the brands are looking for, performance is always at the top.
Huh. Sweet. Okay, last sort of category here. I have a bunch of questions for you around walking a hypothetical athlete through the process of landing a deal. And I think to me, a great place to start is what not to do or what not to say when you make initial outreach.
Yeah, this is the big one. I would say what not to do is don't show up disorganized and just send an email without an attachment with your one sheet on it. Because if you have, make it look, make it easy for these people. Do a little bit of the work for them. And also it's your work to do to create a one sheet and show up prepared. What I don't want to see an athlete do is just be like, "Hi, Finn, I would love for you to sponsor me. Let me know if you have time to talk." The end. And there's nothing else with that. That's never in any part of any business, whether you're trying to get a job at a bank or to be a sponsored trail runner. Like, be ready when you send that. So I would say reach out, put something in the subject line. You can put your name or you can put something else, whether it's partnerships or I don't know what, something that actually has, so it helps that email not land in their spam. But have your one sheet organized, and that one sheet is not just in the body of your contract putting the lists that you've done between now and the past 8 years. No one cares unless you won a gold medal 8 years ago. No one cares what you did 8 years ago.
What are some other things that would be in that one sheet? Is it
One,
kind of like a cover letter type thing? Like what yeah.
yeah, I think that one sheet is, let's say you, be Finn Melanson, your email. No one needs to know what your address is. I think you're really proud to live in Salt Lake, and it's a big part of who you are. So might put Salt Lake City or just whatever name, email. Like, they got to be able to contact you. Where you're from, if that's a part of who you are. Like Katie Asmuth is so proud to live where she does, so we know Mammoth's going on there, right? Um, and then it would be put a photo or two of yourself on there, and also here's a list of 2 or 3 things I did as far as my race results, or let's say if you were like, I don't know, I had these race results, and I also did this FKT, or I don't know, whatever that looks like, for 3 years. This year, last year, the year before. I would also say you need to have what your goals are for, I would say, like this time of year, I might put 2025, 2026 goals.
Mm.
And then within that, you'll put like whatever, if you're like going to do JFK or Javelina, whatever that looks like. But these are the things that brands are going to want to know. They want to know who you are, how to contact you, what you look like, and then a little bit of results. If you want to put like UTMB index on there, that's cool. Honestly, no one really cares about your ITRA score. If they want to know that, they can find it. They can also find your UTMB score, so you don't have to put that on there. But if it's way up there and it makes you feel good, put it on. But then underneath that, the brand is also going to wonder, what is this person's goal for 2026? So by building this, and then also putting on there, like, have you been on podcasts? If you've been on 100 podcasts, please don't put all the podcasts you've been on. Pick 2 of your faves. Pick 2 of your, if you've been in a couple like magazines, or if you write a column for Ultra Running Magazine, like, put that down. But it should be tight and short and a whole lot less information than most people think, and answer all of the questions that are relevant to a brand. Who are you? What have you done? What are you going to be doing?
Mm. And I'm assuming that in terms of the section where you'd put like, here's how I'd help the brand, the most impactful thing you could do is create a race schedule that aligns with their competitive priorities.
Yes, but also only if it's true.
Okay.
And obviously, we all put the 99% of the race schedules that come my way from athletes. I know that, like, most of those things aren't going to happen, because something's going to happen and something's going to need to adjust, but it's all going to be focused around what won't move is the A race usually.
Okay. How long? Well, actually, let me backtrack. What is the window dates wise of contract season? Like, when did it start and when does it typically end?
Gosh, I would say for some athletes, it's always contract season. I mean, I signed 4 people in March.
Okay, so that's a myth that it only happens at like the end of the year,
Yes.
or in Q4.
Exactly. The bulk of it does, absolutely. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you I've lost control of my inbox a while ago. But I will say this, it goes back to golden ticket races and certain things, because what happens in March, what happens in April, it's Black Canyons, it's all these things. So it's really easy for me to sign the person who has continued to beat that drum starting now. Like, don't get discouraged if you don't get signed now, right? But do what you need to do between now and before Western States, because it's not uncommon for a brand to want to pick an athlete or 2 up between January and June.
Once you're engaged with the athlete manager, I guess it must vary, but how long does the courtship take before
Ugh.
signing happens? For lack of
That's
better
such a hard question. A lot longer than everyone wants. On a daily basis, I receive messages. Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? Like, I promise you, the very second that I hear anything, I will call you immediately. It honestly can take. I've had one athlete, I didn't even get to sign our contract together of us working together, and within 48 hours, had them the largest contract of their life. And it was, again, they signed a contract with this brand before this athlete and I even had a chance to sign together. That's how fast it was. Like, I didn't have time to even build a contract for us. I have another athlete that we've been working about maybe 8 months on, but because we started, this is the thing, like, you got to have thick skin. If you really just really start this particular athlete that I'm hoping to tie up here this next couple weeks, we started a golden ticket season last year. So
Mm.
had we not done that, it would be a much shorter amount of time, but there was a lot more runway. It would have been an error for me not to do that.
I'm assuming this doesn't happen in the one sheet. When does requests and negotiation around contract size, money come into the equation?
I would say this, if you reach out to an athlete manager and they respond, if they don't respond, please know that they're absolutely drowning, and it's not like what I hate to hear. Someone's like, oh, well, they blew me off. I can tell you they didn't blow you off. I can tell you they're absolutely swamped and the bulk of their energy needs to go to their existing team and the athletes that they know that are a good fit for them. You might not just be a good fit. You might just not be a good fit for them. That's all it is. It's just like dating, like that. She's just not that into you, right? If they do respond, and you can ask them to set up a call, like, hey, let's just get to know each other. Let's set up a call. If that happens, you'll have a call with them. What often happens next is someone will say, oh my God, I met with Finn. It went really well. I think he thought I was awesome. And then it's sort of, I always use dating as a parallel. Just because someone smiles at you doesn't mean that they want to marry you. So would you have rather had this athlete manager and kind of a jerk to you, and then you didn't think it went well, so then when you didn't get signed that you felt better about it?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen because most athlete managers are respectful and kind people. So they're going to have a good call with you. And honestly, even if it's a great call, there still might not, there might be someone that's a better fit that they're already speaking to, right? Or they might say, hey, we filled our athlete roster. Thank you so much. It was really awesome to meet you. And or we're done. We're not taking anyone else on. What that really means is athletes translate that to, oh, they said they weren't taking anyone on. What that more often than not means is they've already picked the people that they've spoken to and they will be taking them on. And at this point, now the roster is full and it stops with you, which is really hard on the ego. It's really hard when you've given a lot of hope to this. So I can't stress enough that no one is lying to you. It's just that they've already onboarded the people, or that the people they're like, okay, and then we talked to Finn. Finn was great, but we're going to stick with the two people that we already spoke with. We wanted to give Finn a chance because we thought he was a good fit. And you probably are a great fit, but maybe the people that they've already spoken to just have slightly better something else, whatever that is, right? If that doesn't happen, you have a great call, and then they're like, hey, let's come back to the table and chat about this again. The brand will either come to you with numbers, or they might say to you, well, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
So you have to be ready to have that conversation on the fly or afterwards. If that happens and you don't have an agent and they're like, well, what are you looking for? And you panic, I would encourage you to say, you know what, let me get some numbers together and I'll send you an email by the end of the day tomorrow or whenever. But don't feel like you have to give them an answer that second. Also, don't wait a month to do it. Like, get back to them, set a date and get back to them.
How about any advice you have for athletes who are in the fortunate position of having multiple conversations with multiple brands, and just the timelines with each of those brands is different. And
Mm-hmm.
again, hypothetical, where like you get to the end of the year and like it's like, time is of the essence, and you want I don't know, like any advice there? Because I can imagine so many people have horror stories of that.
I always ask, what's the clock on your offer? So you have dates. When do you need to know this by? Ask that of everybody and go from there. Like, if you're waiting out for someone else, then I would say, again, it's easier for me as an agent to be like, look, I'm not screwing around with this anymore. This is the timeline. If you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. Otherwise, the train's leaving the station. If you're an athlete, it's a little harder to have that conversation. But I would let everyone know, if you're waiting on someone, let them know, I need to make this decision by this date. Otherwise, by waiting on you, I'm potentially going to be left with nothing because these other brands need me to answer right now. So just let them know, like, I need to know that, like, if you don't have an offer to me by this date, I'm gone.
Okay. How about for athletes that are under contract and it's a different type of contract season? They are like checking in with their partners. Maybe they're renegotiating. What are some things that this type of athlete should be doing right now in terms of like making the case to get re-signed, or if they're looking
Hmm.
elsewhere, stuff like that?
Yeah. If you want to get re-signed, you should have done this a long time ago, like a year ago, which means so many athletes in a negotiation year will make the error. It drives me crazy. They'll make the error of not doing anything until like 2 months before their contract is up. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to go and do this race because I know that's what my brand wants to do. I'm like, well, what did you do the past 2 years that your brand wanted you to do? Like, I don't know that I would re-sign you if you're not doing anything. If none of you like don't resurface until it's time to negotiate. So I would say you should have been doing that the whole time. And you should always check in. I check in quarterly with everyone who sponsors any athlete that I work with because I want to know. It's just as important to me that this athlete is showing up as a professional as the brand showing up to them. So I would say it should have already happened. If they have done that and now they're like, hey, just let me know when you guys are ready. Like, I just set a call. Honestly, I would just put a call on the calendar and then send your brand manager a message to say, hey, I put something on the call just so we had, or on the calendar just so we had something there. Let me know if we need to adjust.
Mm. And do you think for those athletes, like what is the right amount of communication? Like should that athlete be sending like a monthly update type thing or a quarterly thing just to like stay relevant, top of mind with the brand manager? Like what does good, solid, basic communication look like from an update standpoint on their partnership?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, honestly, if you want to have an actual partnership with the athlete manager and the brand, be present because when fun, good stuff is coming down the pipeline, they're going to call the person that they're in communication with. I mean, it's human nature. So I think monthly is a good deal. I have some athletes who, like, if an athlete gets injured, their first call is to me, their second call is to their athlete manager, and I'm thrilled if their first call is to their athlete manager before me.
Mm.
Like, that should be, you should, but it's not just on the brand. I can't stress that enough. The athlete has to be present to do that. The athlete, it's just as much the athlete's responsibility as the brand's.
That's how about so that reminds me, the culture around injury in that athlete
Hmm.
brand partnership. How like in this day of age, how much leeway and or I guess runway is maybe the better term. Like if an athlete's dealing with injury or injuries plural, how much runway in that relationship do they have? Because I know there's a lot of anxiety around that.
Well, first, communication. Let them know this is what's happening. And then also let them know, like, okay, I think I have a stress fracture. Not sure. Something's all of a sudden off. I'm going to go see a practitioner. I'm going to get imaging done. Don't just go to a PT and have the PT diagnose you without imaging. No one should be diagnosing anything without imaging. Get imaging done and then speak to your doctor, speak to ortho, whoever's going to read your imaging, get lined up with PT, and then let your athlete manager know, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. and here's feedback from everyone. We're thinking like a minimum of 8 to 12 weeks, and I'll keep you posted on things. Your coach also should be heavily involved in this. And it's often like, I mean, I'll get calls from people. I have one athlete who is not signed yet, and he got injured, called his coach, talked to his coach was like, call Kelly, and then we're all in a call together. I'm like, how can I help you? What utilize your team,
Yeah.
and then let your athlete manager for the brand know what's going on, that you're in communication with the team. I also absolutely, like, if you were like, hey Kelly, I have an injury, I'll be like, did you talk to so and so, your brand manager, whoever it is? And you'd say, I haven't yet. And be like, you need to talk to them. You need to let them know within the next 2 days, because I'm going to reach out to them in 3 days and talk to them and let them know and reassure that you are doing A, B, and C. Because I want them to know that you're cared for on this side. And
Mm.
honestly, it's not, some people will interpret that as the brand just wants to make sure that you get healthy so you can race again. And that's 9 out of 10 times not the scenario. The scenario is really that the athlete manager's like, oh my God, I feel so bad for Finn. He was so stoked about this race and now he can't do it. So how can we help Finn?
Mm. Okay. I forgot to ask you earlier about the value of FKTs in this sort of like race tier setup. What's an example of one that's like highly valued at the same level as a Western States, and then do the rest just fall in like a lower tier? Like, how does that all work?
My go-to answer, it depends on the brand. It's not, if someone were to go and set the FKT on the PCT right now, they might get like $5,000 of a bonus
Okay,
across
so
brands.
minimal.
Like I think some people are like, oh, they must get $40,000. No, that's not the scenario. I think brands really love when people add adventure to their year. That is important. But honestly, if you're someone who's really good at storytelling, you can tell that story without having to set an FKT. If it's, you know, depending on what your goal is for that, like doing adventurous things like routes, or excuse me, AT, PCT, Nolans, all those things. There's value in that, but it's more of a value of just showing that you're living the lifestyle that the brand emulates.
Okay. So the PCT example is interesting because, again, well, I'd have to ask you, how pivotal was the AT for Tara by
Well,
comparison?
I mean, that was enormous for Tara. It changed her life,
Yeah.
undeniably.
Yeah.
But it's the FKT bonus for Tara did not change her life.
Gotcha. Okay.
So please hear that. And also, Tara Dower set the overall FKT. That was the story behind that is immense. And
Yeah.
that is what changed it. It was not that Tara got it, and it wasn't that Ultra, was being shady. I love working with Ultra. They're one of my absolute favorite brands to
Mm.
speak with. I have nothing but glowing things to say about them. But they don't, the payout from any VF brand is according to what the weight of that FKT is. So that was not what changed Tara's life. It was in doing that, the trajectory just, it's still. Tara gets more media requests than any athlete I have ever known. And I know this because I receive her emails. I field all of her media.
Okay. Sweet. Last one. To what
Mhm.
extent are you seeing athletes receive event appearance offers to show up across the US and the world? Is that a growing thing?
For like races specifically, Finn,
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like it's that top tier. Let's say it's that 100K group, right? Uh, and I would say for athletes that I work with, if they're asked to come to a race and they're not going to like to be there, it's usually with the intention of can they come and race? And if I'm like, that's not really on par for where they're at right now, they don't need to be doing that. Like, there's no need for them to do this. They're happy to come and speak and do a panel or whatever it is that you would like. Work at aid station, they can do commentary, and that is paid. if I'm like, hey, Finn, these people want you to come and do this race. Do you want to race it? And you'll be like, oh, I actually do want to race. I'm like, do you want to race though? Not just go and run, but like throw down and race.
Yeah.
You'll be like, I do. I'm like, all right, I'll get back to you. Then I go back to the whoever asked me and we can check from there. And it's probably going to be like a collab of different things. But yeah, I would say it probably happens like once a month.
Before we go, is there anything that we didn't discuss that you want to have sort of like a parting message around, and or I mean, feel free to say anything about, the fact that you do a lot of athlete representation in the sport as well.
Yeah, thank you. My roster is full. I'm not taking on any clients before, just to make sure everyone knows that.
You don't get inundated.
I need to just get through this contract season first. I will say this, be mindful for those that are looking for representation. Very, very few people, like single digit percentage people need an agent. And I will say, if you are thinking of working with someone, make sure they know what they're doing. There's it's damaging and dangerous for an athlete to trust someone that does not know what they're doing. And this role comes with a great responsibility, not just to an individual athlete that you're working with, but to this community. We are in a space right now that I can't really think of many other sports like football, basketball, baseball. They've been around for decades. This space is so they're established. We're at a point where we have the ability to make not just positive change, but to build from a really strong frame. And if we're starting with a shortcut, if we're starting with people who don't know what they're doing, who are just kind of pretending and are being reckless because they have no idea how to even negotiate or read a contract and understand the language of a long form contract, that is not someone who should be representing anyone.